Having said that though,
hey guys, I'm back on Twitch, just if you guys want to let people know. We'll see if anyone wants to join in. Where's my... Twitter? Where's my Twitter? Back. Streaming. See how many people we can get back in here. Okay, so this honestly played out pretty cool because we had some odds of... Is my mic on before I start here? Yeah, it is. Okay. We had some odds of retesting lows during this period here around 218 and 222. So they ended up putting in a higher low, like I was saying on Discord. If they can put a higher low here and then push, okay, off of that 5455, ideally to retest 64, then they could very well do that 3-bar flag that we were talking about, okay? So that one, or 211, 212 minute. I don't know if we have the highest odds of this panning out, but at least reversing it or something like that. So for this to pan out, unfortunately, you do have to stay stuck until at least like 304, but it does give it an odd of giving us like the end of day break back to like 7193. Does that make sense? This is the only way that this could stay alive, but it would have to be like extremely late day pushes. And holds of the 71, 54, 55, 58 breaks back over 64, 66, 68. Unfortunately, with this case though, it does make it so that our afternoon is a little bit sticky, because what that means is, especially between these periods here, like we have all the way until just after 3. So the earliest period I think I saw was around 254, which were some of the delayed bear odds, but most of these windows for bulls don't really open up until after 3, so that's why I was a little bit concerned if they kind of just keep it stuck. But keeping it stuck actually works in favor for bulls, because they'd want to keep it beneath these ranges, but then maybe push into like the last hour of the day. Another scenario would be that they basically negate those bear patterns that we had. So we saw some of them on the 125. Okay, let me show you guys. These were more in line with highs versus those other time frames being more in line with overnight lows. These extend till 250. So we definitely still have some risk here from when we hit highs at mid-session at 2:45 p.m. Yeah, sorry, not 2:45, at 12:45 p.m. And I think it's the 87, yeah, these ones here. These ones that started to slightly negate, they're not really the best odds, but this is what could keep us inside range. Does that make sense, you guys? Until basically end of session today. This is what could make odds extremely, extremely, extremely late. And you can basically see that this is where that would be stuck. What was our 222 flip? What time frame was that? 222. I think it was like a 90. It was something close to this. It wasn't quite this. Was it? No, it was... I think it was a 94 minute. But you can see some of the structures like this even on these time frames. Like look at the 93. This is in line with 1236 stick break earlier. You see how it went into an inside range and could stay stuck till like 342? Okay, and then I think it was the 94 minute, this one here. Yeah, it is. This is the one that is linked to like some of those lower highs. Okay. Especially the highs that occurred around 1245 through 1252. The 87 minute, I'm pretty sure, is the one that was linked with the lower high at 1251. Okay, so how do I explain this? this point in time, okay, between 218 and 222 is linked with these points in time right here, which kind of hit those highs and then stalled and made a little lower high. Does that make sense? So in order for you to sustain structure, to have extensions to make new highs by like 306, 312, whatever, these points in time have to make higher lows. Does that make sense? Because you're trying to basically offset the probabilities that you had during that window. I know it's very, very confusing, but let me make this a different color so you guys can see it. Okay? Do you see the higher low right here? Off of this low right here? Does that make sense? This is linked to this, okay? Which is linked to that lower high. Lower high, higher low, okay? And then you can see that immediate price action that occurred right after that. They had to push, basically. And this is what can give you those either late day extensions, because these points in time are linked with here, which is very, very late, like 342, 348, 356. Basically last 15 minutes of the session today. Or depending on how much range you achieve before 306 and 309 and 312, you could actually have a sooner break. Does that make sense? Because a lot of it's relative to whether or not you stay stuck inside on these like 94, 87, okay? You know what we could actually try finding? Which one of these could engulf? So, and then the 125, this doesn't flip till 250. So we're still at some risk, but obviously I would say by 248, 250, you probably want to be at least above the 6466 structure, okay? And then the 212, this, technically if you don't flag, you could end up starring. That still can create volatility for that period, end of day, but it's very much relative to what they do in the next, what time is it? Probably the next like 17 minutes. Can you guys help me find a potential outside bar here? So like you see how this could basically engulf, like obviously that's not going to engulf by 235, but this is a really nice pattern, like especially for like the 1 p.m. flips. Help me find some bars that could engulf. By link? How do I choose my time frames? That's an extremely complicated question. There's like 1,000 factors that go into that. But no, it doesn't have to necessarily be linked to high or low. It's relative. So in this case, in that case specifically, are you on the mic or no? Because if I'm talking and you're not even on the mic, then there's no point. So I guess in order to find that outside pattern, we probably have to see which bars occurred before 124. 124. So that, but includes that period before 306. I don't know if that makes sense, but like this. Yeah, okay, this makes sense. This could engulf. This is 301 and it includes that 124. Okay. And then you could look at one that already this runs until end of session close. So that specific structure for time basis, it's not just based off highs and lows. The 306 p.m. periods are based off lows, okay? But Okay, the 12 or 2:22 p.m. is based off intraday highs. Does that make sense? In order to link the two, like so where you're linking your highs and lows, you have to make a higher low. Okay? Which is basically offsetting the lower high. To offset, it's very confusing. Offset the lower high. So ask me about time frames, you're probably going to get confused. Does that make sense? Because your 222 is linked to, let's say, 12:45, 12:51, okay? PM. Okay? So for that period of time, to basically be in line with your lows, which are linked to 306, you have to form a higher low. Does that make sense? To offset the lower high that you formed at 12:51, 1 o'clock, so on and so forth. I don't know how to make that make sense. It's a very strategic way of looking at time and price, but no, it can't. Well, okay, so think about what you're asking. You're asking me how to simplify timing exact high of day, exact low of day, exact price. How can you simplify that? If you can figure out how to simplify it, tell me so then I don't have to do all that work. Okay, so there's no way for that to be simplified. It requires a lot of work because you're trying to hit a very high level of accuracy. Do you get what I'm saying? You can't do that without it being somewhat complex. Linked to one another. Yeah, your highs and lows are always linked to one another, but I'm saying that this is directly correlated to here. Okay? This is correlated to here. Okay? But in theory, we know that this has to sustain and make a higher low, otherwise that's where risk is going to increase. And you're not going to see that extension through here, okay, if you take out the lows right here. Does that make sense? That's how they're linked. And then this point in time is correlated to end of day, basically. Okay? I haven't measured the actual ranges, but let me see one thing. And also, I don't expect you guys to do this. This is how I trade. I'm not expecting other people to do what I'm doing. I would imagine though that from open to highs right here, so from 9:30 this morning to where they stalled highs without even looking at this, and this is mid-session, no, it's not. This is my own theory. This is probably linked to end of session today. I would imagine that this is linked directly to 4 p.m. Do you see that? This is off opening range. And it makes sense because this is so easy because today's highs are exactly at mid-session. So obviously it's going to be linked to 4 p.m. Okay? Yeah, that's how I correlated the two. Well, and to negate that bear structure, there was a bear structure on specific time frames I was looking at. And there's some potential bull structures that are kind of offsetting that. So holding it, making a higher low, could put those bull odds in play, but it doesn't necessarily have to be too much range because you still want to keep it within that means and before those specific periods. There's a lot of factors that go into it because you're trying to basically hit a pretty high point in accuracy, which is never an easy thing to do, like even for me. So I probably also would want to see this. Remember how earlier we were looking at those 38-minute periods? I don't know if you guys remember this. No, I don't. When we cleared, where was it? Off of 2-2. And then they hit that downside. Do you remember this right here? This was 38 minutes when they cleared 7-1, 20, 7-1. This right here, 2-2. and then they hit this right here, right into open. It was roughly that 38 to 40 minute window. This was the same window. So this is very interesting that they did a very similar time frame right here with these lows, okay? And kind of where they stalled the highs. I just want to check one thing, if this aligns to 3 o'clock. Yeah, it does. I also want to see from highs to this point here. Those are like extremely late day odds. And then I want to see what the differential is between the 124 and here. 58 minutes. 320. Let me just write this down. I also want to see what, that's probably the median range here, but I want to see what midpoints would come in. So if this is roughly 45 to 50 minutes from that 222 period to, that's 20, basically like 22 and a half. This is the median frame between that 306 and that 322 or 222. Weren't you in my Discord for like 5 years? Pretty sure you were. I don't always share time concepts just because they are a bit confusing. But this is the median point, you guys, between that 222 and 306 period. So I do want to see if they can try maybe retesting that 7164. There's literally no better way than watching in real time. Like, no video is going to show you anything close to that. But I don't always share my time theories, though. I only started doing that recently. One, because it's my own personal edge in trading, and two, it's too complex that I feel like it would probably go over the majority's heads, because I'm not just trying to decide. It's like a lot of it's price measured to my ranges, which are calculated ranges based off incremental math, which are linked to time. So it's like, it's pretty complex in that sense of things. So majority of people just prefer enjoying it, I guess, like watching things pan out. And we had a lot of very precise timing points today. But if you've been listening the last hour or half hour or 20 minutes, you should have been able to pick up at least a few things in terms of structure. Oh. You have the same name as someone that was in my Discord for like a long time. I wasn't sure if that was you. Thanks for being here. So this point, you guys, this period here is the median between here and here, okay? It's just the median time frame. It's to kind of give us an idea of what kind of odds they would give around that 306 period. Otherwise, they could easily come back and retest these lows. We clearly want to get back over the 6.4, 6.6. So 50 bars. So like that would be 25 minutes. It's roughly within this period here. I guess you could say between 245 and 248. And a lot of these candles are still keeping us stuck anyway, so we're still stuck in some inside bars. If they don't retract enough range, let's say before 350, 356, are there some probabilities for end of day sell-offs based on a structure that looks something like this? This is why understanding price and range is pretty important, because depending on how much they can retrace, then they have a chance of getting outside of these bars at these specific times, specifically since these are linked to the high. Okay. What's another thing that could pan out here? There's a few scenarios that they could do. Yeah, and you have to try seeing them. One thing that they could do here, especially if they don't try taking out 6-4, because they have some odds around 250, 3 o'clock, 306, could they push down lows before 306, make a lower low, because we technically still have room to 49, this area here, okay? Could they do something like that, and then, so basically start down, kind of like this, and then still bring it back into like the last part to pin it around 664, 71, 78, okay? There's a few ways that they could trade this, and the reason being is because we've already hit max ranges. They're just recycling ranges now, okay? Once you hit like 256 point intervals, they don't really owe us much more than this. Let me reset this. So obviously it's in our best interest to, I would say, stay range bound until at least that 306 window, which is this area here, because that's going to give the better odds of like the end of day breaks. This was the next period here for a back test if they don't break. So it's pretty clear that if they can get above 6-4 at that period, then they're starting to really reduce the downside risk. I think the 254 was the 254 was the 125. The most simplified way of looking at this too is obviously you can't bearish engulf fully down like within that. You already kind of broke that range, but they're basically trying to sustain close to like this, especially from like an open close ratio. Do you see what I'm saying? Like around that 7149. Do you guys see that? So they basically held above 50% of that range. This is a very, very, very easy way of looking at this. If you're someone that understands a little bit better, which is fibs or something like that in relevance to time. So think about it like this. If they're sustaining this, then this could keep odds in play for like that second half and negate this, right? They obviously have odds of retesting these ranges here around this 150, not 150, sorry, 250, 254 period, okay? So this is where you'd be at risk of this 222, 221 retest. If they make a higher low and base, if they do it at 50, it's invalid because that's after the fact. That doesn't really count. But this was a period that had risk for downside, so all they're really doing here though is recycling ranges. So what I mean by this is if you go back now and look at this, that's not valid within that frame. Do you get what I'm saying? That frame already passed. This is the 1254 highs, lower highs, which is linked to 3. How long are we at major risk till? And you can't get this wrong, because I said it earlier today, and I said that this is going to be the most important time today, so make sure you guys have it written down, because this is probably what's going to decide the remainder of the trend from then until end of session. What's the most calculated point in time today? Which window? What point in the day is linked to our overall session lows? And to potentially a bunch of structures that we have here in terms of the real-time highs. No, that's a little too far out. It's 306, 309, 312, I think, 318 or something like that. Okay. So are we still at risk until that period of time, basically, to come back and take out the intersession lows? Think of it like this. Like, this period of time is linked to your overall lows for the session overnight, okay? Obviously, to come back and retest your real-time lows, you clearly have to take out this 124 period, okay? You're not going to get any progression unless you come back, like, beneath these ranges in here, okay? At least for, like, retesting this range in here. Whereas sustainment of that area or that range, specifically at those times of day, is what could allow for that retracement back up. And we still have no real constructive breaks. Remember what I said earlier, you're not going to have any constructive breaks unless you come over 7-1, 7-4, okay? So far they've been stalling the 6-4, 6-8, which is the line that I have here. This is 6-8 is always the core entry anyway, okay? When do bull odds open up, or when are they increased? When do bulls have higher odds in the session? Because this is definitely not the period that they have higher odds. And if you guys even thought so, then you guys are not paying attention. The only way they would have had higher odds is if they would have cleared back in here, which they failed to do. Okay, there was no breaks of 6-8 to 7-1 or 7-4. When do odds for bulls start to increase? Uh, 254 backtesting here. This is the next period in time between that 250 and 254 window. So this is correlated to this 218 and 222 window. Sometimes it's easier without anything on here so you guys can see. So this is the period that basically you're retesting these sticks right here, okay? This range in here. So what would you want to do ideally at 254? What do you want to do at this period here? Obviously you want to make another higher low, right? So, and you'd have to try to come back, retrace, do the same thing that you did here. So you want to make a higher low, retrace, ideally before 3. Do you notice the similarities in price action here at 323 and this period here at 355? Bulls have a higher odd. I feel like 324, yeah, but like mostly after 306, 312, specifically if they can start holding these higher lows, okay? This period here is the exact same as this period here. It's not just about time and price. It's about price action. Okay, so what kind of action do you want to see here? You have to see a higher low. You have to try to retrace what? What do you have to retrace during this period? Specifically if you hold these higher lows. And ideally by 3, but you still have until around the 306, 309 period. 306, 309 is the best period. What do you guys think? What's the minimum that you need? And I know this is very boring PA, but this is like a way of kind of breaking it down so that the most boring afternoon sessions are the best ones for like trying to understand or break down structure. Okay? Especially when there's a lot of overlap between specific points in both time and price. I'm just gonna start cleaning this up a bit though, because this is super messy. Come on, you guys, what has to happen here? The most important 10-15 minutes of the session is coming up, so you guys better have some sort of a plan or something in place. What has to happen during this period here? You don't want it going too high either, because if you go too high, what could happen? And by too high, I mean above 71, 74. What could happen if you do that before 306? Or what kind of price action would you need then after 306 to avoid major volatility from occurring? Could you would you stall? Because let's say, for instance, they push this all the way back here, okay? You could have a nasty star reversal, okay? So obviously you don't want that. If they did something like that, then you'd be forced to continue. Otherwise, you'd be at risk. You're almost better off kind of staying stuck in this box, this neutral box that I drew for you guys. How much time do we have? Could this still be a period in time where you come back to retest these lows, specifically off that 222, 124 period here? Remember what we were saying earlier about trading in the means? Just in like base framework of like the 100-point theory. When you trade in the means, you have to come to some sort of a like decision point, right? Don't you see how that's the case in like these ranges here? So those are like 5.2, 5.8, 6.4, okay? These areas, okay? It's just a theory I created based on how price reacts typically around ranges like this. And just based on looking at this, that makes sense. This is just giving you an example. These are not actual spots, but for today's session, but so, and it's usually, can you guys see my middle screen? Okay, it's usually a 17-point basis where they decipher trend, okay? Notice they're stalling 34 points from highs. Notice they're unable to break 17 points right now. That's kind of why they're stalling here. And this is just a theory I created, but if you look at today's price action, you can see that that's exactly what's happening. Does that make sense? Like, look. From where they stalled to here, okay, it's 34 points. To where they're breaking to here. Do you see how they're stalling 17 points? Isn't that insane? Like, the theory is working so accurately today, especially because they're holding exactly 5-1. What area does the means usually start at? 5-1, 5-8, 6-4, right? Core areas are usually 6-8 breaks. That's where they're struggling here. So if you're someone that wants to improve a little bit on using like the base theory, this is a really good example of using it, okay? This is a great example today for using the 100-point theory when looking at the means, okay? Specifically 34 and 17 point ratios. Let's do a poll since we haven't done one so far this stream. Let's see what you guys think. 306, 309, 3:18 p.m. period. Back test lows, 50s. Reclaim 6168 plus. Stay in between. Staying in between is what would keep it basically stuck. What time is it? Okay, let's see what you guys think. Because I do think that the market has to reach somewhat of a deciding point here, at least to give us an idea of what they might want to do end of day. Because a lot of these are still linked to end of session today. Can you guys vote on that, please? And sorry, that shouldn't say 6168, that should say 7168, but... I am curious to see what you guys think. Yeah, we did. I think that's probably why. I did notice some volume coming in on the chains too. It was like over 16,000 worth. So, and those are like, those are out of the money though. Like the 712s, I think 711s. But it's worth at least noting that. So we figured that there's pretty good odds that they'll keep this stuck in this box. And if you guys forgot, I drew them earlier, but this right here. That's what I figured would be the case if they can't get over 6871. So far, that looks like the case, especially above 55, 56, but beneath 64. Okay, so like these boxes that we drew in here. This area is kind of like you're still playing with some risk. This area unfortunately keeps you pretty neutralized. It doesn't really do anything for us. That's the area that I figured they could keep us stuck. This area starts to increase odds, and then this area would be the best for your probabilities this afternoon. We should see some volatility, guys, in this period, so make sure you have the ranges marked. And specifically on like 6-4, 6-6, 6-8 failures, which so far are pretty obvious that they stalled these areas here. Okay, I kind of want to watch this in like just a blank chart because I feel like sometimes it's easier to see. These points in the day have the highest odds for deciding direction of our trade. Okay? Okay? Everyone is on the same page? And I said this earlier, beneath 5148 would give odds for bears. Above 6671 would kind of neutralize things, give better odds for bulls. Obviously over 74 gives best odds for bulls. And then keeping it stuck in between is what's going to keep this basically sideways, okay? Do you see how they're kind of playing with fire here at 306? So 306, 60, 71, 56. The window is between 306 and roughly 318. Also, them not breaking up before 306 is what could also delay things till like very, very late session today. Because remember how I said earlier these lows right here are and the highs are situated and aligned with like 342, 348, 356. That's what could cause even longer delays. So let's take a look at the 211, 212. Or 312, sorry. 312 off the 212. Stay in between. Imagine we end up testing lows because that was the lowest, the lowest voted. I thought we would stay in between, but I could be wrong. So I was thinking that they keep it stuck between that yellow box, mainly because of the fact that they didn't break up here, at least to 6.4, 6.6, okay? But they also didn't break down beneath these ranges here, so those all kind of play a pretty big contributing factor. Like even here, that's still technically a higher low at 306, right? In comparison to the 54 and 22. It's mostly between that 309 and 312 period. I think that risk can really increase, especially if they keep it beneath that 5.1 or beneath that 5.5, 5.8. But either way, they have to come to a deciding point here. Is this a good afternoon to be trading same day expiration? Especially after stalling 718788 and then also failing to get beneath 5.1? Probably not, right? Especially with it being OPEX. So this is a really good session to study time and price, specifically in terms of like how they can trade things. And we already knew that our odds were super late anyway, so they weren't really going to break major range till 306, 309, 312. Does that really make you want to stay entirely short from these areas here? It makes it harder, that's for sure, especially with a lot of like the back and forth. So far, structure is still favoring bears though, since they stalled 6.8 and 6.6 and 6.4. But we'll see if they try holding off during this period here. what's that spot? 7151. Okay. Is this the closest we've gotten to those lows so far? And here. What do you guys think? $3.12 is the midpoint between the 318 and 306 periods. So this is kind of like the 50% time interval between this period here, like our 306 and 318. So this probably has one of the higher odds. So this is 12. This is the 6-minute bar. Okay. So what do you think has to happen here, especially off like the 30-second intervals, which I think are now? This is 50% of the time range during this period. This period had the highest odds of making a decisive break, okay? And we already know what has to break in order for continuation to occur, right? Or what doesn't break so that they do nothing, which is probably what's going to play out, but we'll see. These were the areas that we were watching. 71.52 being tested here within our cycle. Something I noticed off that 312 period is they didn't retrace it back over that 5450, okay? But they still took it back over that 54 stick. So that's where that could end up becoming conflicted, because they retraced here, but they didn't retrace back over this range in here. So it keeps odds high for retesting that 71, 51, 50, but could still keep an odd that they could maybe sustain this box range right here. Does that make sense? And maybe don't give like that full continuation on the downside, because they could have the odds of retracting it in time. Okay? Is that 71.51? Yeah, it is. Remember earlier when I was saying that they could take out this low by just slightly so that they can make an engulfing pattern? And I was trying to find a time frame that would show that. And I said that especially if it occurs between 306 and 318. Does anyone want to help me try finding that? I took 3 contracts off that hold just because there's a decent chance they could try retracing before 318. Who wants to try helping me find that? So basically what we'd want is a time frame between 124 and before 312. I think we've said something earlier. I don't remember what it was though. 124, I think it was like the 93, 95 or something. I don't remember. These. Okay, you see how this could then engulf by close or like late into the session, especially if they take out that low, but they do it after that period of time. So the 93 minutes a good example. I think it was the 97, but let me just double check. The 94 is another good example. This one runs until 356. Do you guys understand what I'm saying or no? These are specific structures that could happen. I think odds are not very high, but this does put it at a probability. And specifically, if they hold here and retrace before 318. Does that make sense? So like they'd have to at least get back over this 5758, and you'd probably have to see some continuation in price action by that 324 period. We had some odds at 328, 330 earlier too, and then we were gonna watch the 4-2, 4-8, and then there's a lot of odds today around the 5-6 period, which is super late, obviously. But do you guys understand price structure in that sense or no? Like to engulf, you still would be required to take out the low, but it would have to be done during that time interval. The only reason why this could also be a bit of a risk is because that 3-bar down that we talked about. So I would have probably preferred that they would have done that maybe closer to like 306. But remember how we said earlier that one of the riskier things that they could do this afternoon is if they don't get enough ranges, they could do like a late day sell off or something like that into like the last 15 to 5 minutes of session close. A lot of this is going to be based on this 5-1 hold and just how much range they can retrace, probably before 330. So let's see. I figured that the neutralized odds had probably the highest probabilities, but there was some odds at 328, 42. This keeps deleting them. And then I'm gonna watch, I always watch 5-4, 5-5, but today there's a flip at 5-6. Well, that could help a little bit. I noticed XOM was also moving off the 142 spot. This was our big area in the past, so I also noticed that it stalled at 152.88 in pre-market yesterday. I usually don't like streaming sessions like this just because they're pretty boring afternoons, but I don't know if this is at least helpful for you guys to understand why price is moving the way it's moving, or how, especially on an OPEX session, then I don't really mind. But do you see why I figured the yellow and orange had the highest odds? Like they could basically still take out this low, but then they could still keep it sideways. It doesn't really progress us in any sort of shape, way, or form. Like they still held and closed above, but that slight takeout is what could put those extended patterns in play. But the issue is those are very late odds in the session. These are also pinnable areas for us anyway. Like these are big targets for us for the week. So the market leaving them here would make sense to me. Even them taking it back to here still makes sense, but the odds weren't as high until later in the session. And it really helped me personally in terms of understanding that they could keep it stuck until at least 306, 318. Does that make sense? So like I wasn't really going to see any sort of real movement until then, which even that movement, even though they took out the low, it was very underwhelming, right? Oh, it turned out that my appointment wasn't even booked, so I got lucky because she's like, "Oh, I don't even see you in the calendar." I was like, "Okay, well that's good because I'm not coming." Which honestly, I feel like if I was booked in, I could have just went because this is not very fun. I think I'm gonna take a break, guys. Like I will stream until end of session, but I'll leave the screen on and I'm just gonna keep myself muted because there wasn't really a whole lot of odds in this time frame here. Like there are some around 328, 324, but if they retest lows, I guess we still have like that tiny bit of room, and that's kind of the annoying part is they're leaving about like 2 points on each end each time. Okay, so kind of like here. I drew these arrows just to kind of help you guys understand the ranges or whatever, but actually this could probably also be orange. Start deleting these. Okay, I'll be right back. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I was chewing, so I didn't want to talk. This was a pretty good sustainment period, I would say, after 318, 324. The window opens up around 336, 342. Remember, we're at risk of some nasty 3-bar reversals down if they don't retrace enough range, right? So you could use time frames like the 87-minute, the 94-minute. These could engulf. The 211, 212 could flag. So far you can kind of see that those could flag. Which technically could engulf too, because they're outside bars. But our bigger concern are these ones here, okay? So if they can't push it enough, they're better off pushing it down. Does that make sense? To maybe make some odds for like a star or something like late day. But if they can't get it high enough within these frames, then it's in our best interest for them to honestly take it back lower. And the reason I say that is because you don't want to make a 3-bar reversal. Does that make sense? Okay, so these areas here are huge and the pressure is high, so that it has to start pushing now. Like it's running out of time. Some of the earliest odds that open up right here for bear flags are 342, 345. Okay, so at least getting it back to this range in here can somewhat mitigate or minimize like the big risk that's in store for the last 10 to 15 minutes of the session. I'm not trading anymore. I just have the calls that I rolled into Monday, but this is just so that you can see how the price is moving. Yet premiums are not moving. They haven't really moved because of OPEX and how price traded in the range, and especially with them delaying, even taking it down to backtest 5-1 until the 306 to 318 period. So this is more just for studying purposes. Or you can trade other individual names too. Like there's NVIDIA moved up a bit. Let me reset this. I have oil on my hands. I'm not used to eating this early, so I got full so fast. All right, let's see. 342 is the first opening window, okay? So let's see. 7164 would be the absolute minimum that you'd probably want to test or break at these periods here. Can someone document the 342 stick, please? 342. This was Izzy's earliest window for bulls trying to reclaim or at least avoid a nasty bear reversal from forming this afternoon. I think the 87 flips at 4.5. The 42 was the 93 minute, I think, or something like that. Yes. Okay. This wasn't off highs though. This was off the 36. So that's why we're still okay. What time are we really at risk if they don't start pushing? They have to start pushing here. What time of day is going to put us at huge risk into the close? Especially if they don't get their asses moving above 6.4, 6.6, 6.8. And that point in time is linked to high of day. 350. What? 356. Could we see some pressure into the 350, 352, 354, 355 period ahead of 356? The interesting thing about this is it's correlated to highs, but it would also include the 354, 55 period. So yes, okay, so they could, I don't know if they could engulf, but at the very, very least, they at least need to get back above this yellow box, right? Which is probably around the 50% range for that candle that we just looked at. So what was that time frame? 94 minute. You basically have to be at least back above at least above here. So that makes sense. Basically back above 71.68, okay? What time is it? 4.5 was the next flip. always watch 48, 49 anyway, but obviously 350. Do you guys see how this is what would make it basically pinned into the close at potentially our core areas? Like 7161, 7171, sorry, 7168, 7174, 7175, 7178. These areas were extremely calculated for the session today. So that's partially why they might have wanted to wait until end of session, especially on holds of 5-1. Okay. I would only be more concerned of breaking these ranges if they don't start moving here before 350, or at least by like 354, 355. I don't have any contracts left for today's expiration though. I covered everything. I just have some contracts left that I rolled into Monday earlier today. Those are the ones I did off 7120s. What was the worst scenario that we mentioned? Which could still happen, by the way, if they don't get moving here. The worst scenario isn't even downside. It's staying stuck here. This area implies volatility. In this box area here between 5.2 and 6.6. The yellow range, which I figured we had some pretty high odds of staying there if they don't move late day. What do you guys think? You think they're going to keep it between 71.51 and 66, or do you guys think that they actually have some odds here of taking out 6.668 into the close? End of day. Let's see. Now that you guys see that we've held 5-1, end of day. 7151, 7164 stuck. 7166 to 7171 break. 7171 plus. Back test into close. 67151. Let's set that for just 2 minutes. All right, what do you guys think, if you don't mind voting on that? So a lot of this is relative to how they're reacting to 6-4. So put your votes in. I'm curious to see what you guys think. Based on how price was reacting, it seemed like the highest odds were taking it to here. Remember, they could take out this low or bring it back to the low and it could still technically hold. Because remember how I said they could take it down into a star reversal, which technically is safer for bulls than staying green on this time frame. If you understand structure, you don't want to stay green here if it's not green enough. You're better off going back beneath 5.1, 5.4. Does that make sense? Or back beneath like 5.6, 5.4, like closer to like 5.1, 5.2. So a lot of this is relative to exactly where you're hitting in terms of structure. And we're obviously running out of time now. There's only like 6 minutes left until this period here flips. Let's get some more votes. This is a pretty neutralized session so far. $350 coming up. 349 back testing 7158 after stalling 7164. They did test 7164 though at 342, which is what could make this a bit conflicting and allow for those delays. 348 and 349, you guys, were not any flips. They're a lot later today. The actual flips were 342 and 356, but I do like watching this period just to kind of see what happens, but this stick here gave odds of extensions through here, so all right, 350 trying to hold off 5758. We'll see if it can take out the 6-4 range. The median price to break is around the 6-6 area, okay? Watch the 30-second intervals because those usually give you the best idea of the direction it's going to take. So, like in here. Does 350 have high odds for the session based on, I know it's a generic time and it's the typical volatility stick, but based on today's read, what do you guys think? Obviously this point in time matters, but it's not as important today as this period here. Because remember, they could still take it back down, and technically that could still hold lows, which is what would keep it within that box. And I felt like that had the highest odds, but I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, that means they have to push very fast right now, which they're not doing. They have like 3-4 minutes. Not even, actually. We have 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3-4 minutes. They're still holding 7158 though. You see how they're holding our orange line? This is the area that would trigger some volatility again, okay, beneath 5758. So what conditions have to be met by the not 356, 355? What do you guys think? At an absolute minimum to even keep odds in play for end of day. Not even a run up, but like at least like mitigating risk or something like that. At least over 6-6, 6-8, I think. All right, 2.5 minutes. And honestly, guys, this is just more for an exercise to understand price action better. This is a really good session to just learn from, if anything. How informed do you guys think 354, 55 are? And specifically in terms of not even range, but just deciding like overall market's fate into the last 5 minutes of the close today. Pretty important. Okay, so we'll see if it has enough strength at 355. At at least to get it back to 6-6, 6-8, and maybe give us some sort of an odd of pinning 7-1, 7-3, 7-4. This needs at least like a 6-4 break though. So far this is still kind of weak. We'll see what they do out 5-5. I'm just going to delete this so I can see it better. Six stall at 355, but no breaks beneath 5-8. I feel like this is just going to keep it in that box, even though this does put us at some risk for the after hours session here. They could try to immediately negate, but that would require a very aggressive stick at 356. Okay? In terms of like mitigating risk, I'm saying. Pin the close, guys. What do you think? So if 5-6 can push aggressively, it could at least mitigate some of that risk early on, but then it would have to keep pushing. I don't think it could stall. Otherwise, that risk is on for the after hours session. So far, it's still pretty weak. I think they're keeping it in that neutral box range, which just basically kills off premiums on both ends of the trade. And that was pretty obvious too when 342 stalled and there was no continuation over 6-6. And specifically 355 not taking out 6-6. Where do you guys think they'll pin the close? They have pretty good odds of just keeping us in this box, unfortunately. And that's what I thought that they would do. But again, I'm wrong sometimes. Like they obviously, if they would have taken out 6-6, 6-8, they could have maybe pushed to 7-1. But the only way that they'd even have a probability of that is if 5-8 can get back over like 6-4 or something. If they decide to save it for the final minute. There were odds at 4 though that were linked to high of day and open, since highs were hit at exactly mid-session. Give me a number, guys. Come on, quickly. Where do you think they'll put the 359 stick? This is a very fun spot because really they could just keep it flat, but they do have a tiny odd of breaking 6-6. I think odds of breaking down 5-1 are pretty low now, considering they at least took out 6-4 and held at 5-5, 5-6, but what do you guys think? I would love a close above 7-1-6-6. I don't know if we'll get that, but that would be at least like the minimum core close, or even like 7-1-6-8, but for real time, it might be hard if they don't get back over 6-4. 6-4 could also be pretty calculated if they want to just kind of keep it in between. 6-1 is also calculated because that was that median risk that we talked about earlier. They're trying to push over 6-3, 6-4. Let's see. Let me just delete these so... 6-1, remember, was that median risk that we talked about earlier, around 6-1, and 5-9-50. So keeping it there, it is a pretty volatile spot, but technically speaking, it would be enough. Odds were higher at 4, so I guess we'll see what happens at 4. 6-1-50. That's exactly where I thought they'd close that. Especially when they didn't take out 6-4, you guys, on that 5-8 stick. 6-1 is a very calculated spot for the market to pin. Well, I know that was a very boring session, but hopefully you guys at least learned a bit about OPEX, how they kind of position things, the way that things traded, the timing of things, and how it kind of rolled out into end of day odds, what they did during this period here versus what they didn't do during these periods here, okay, and how it all kind of comes into play to basically what kind of ranges you could get. So after seeing how they reacted here and here, I had a very good feeling that they would keep it between, like, basically under 61, 64, but, or 70, I keep saying 60, oh my god, 71, 64, but above 7151 area. And that kind of is what gives you that sticky price action. So pinning in the means it can give volatility into next week. So obviously into next week, you can already think from now forward, you obviously want to have opening ranges around core spots. I think that'll help our conditions a bit next week. Opening flat or staying in here could just kind of keep things sideways. Gapping down, but relative to where you gap down, let's say we had a gap down over the weekend to 71.20s. Technically, that's still bullish, but could require the 70, 88, 70, 92 back test. We are hitting our 6th bar next week on that 2 days. So, and it is the median frames between the April 20th and 22nd. So next 2 sessions are going to be pretty important for us deciding whether or not market wants to continue from now until month end. Our big flip date this month is April 28th. Okay, have a good weekend, guys. Thanks for watching.